The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Maya Chen pressed her trembling hand against her lower back, each breath sending lightning bolts of pain through her 17-year-old body. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and fear, a cocktail that made her stomach churn, almost as much as the throbbing ache that had brought her here at 2 in the morning. She'd driven herself, keys slipping from her sweaty palms 3 times before she managed to start her beat-up Honda Civic, the same car her parents had bought used when they decided she was responsible enough for transportation. Maya Chen? The nurse's voice cut through the ambient hospital noise, the distant beeping of machines, hushed conversations between medical staff, and the occasional sob from other emergency room visitors. Maya looked up, her dark eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something deeper, something that had been building for months like sediment in still water. The pain had started 6 hours earlier, right after dinner, right after her sister Lily had playfully shoved her against the kitchen counter during what their parents called normal sibling roughhousing. But this wasn't normal, Maya knew. Nothing about Lily's behavior had been normal for the past 2 years, not since she'd turned 15 and discovered that her size advantage over Maya, 3 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier, could be weaponized in ways that left no visible marks, at least not where their parents would notice. "Can you walk?" the nurse's voice asked, her badge reading Sandra in friendly blue letters. Sandra had kind eyes, the sort Maya had learned to distrust, because kindness in adults often came with conditions, with expectations that she would minimize, explain away, or forgive whatever had happened to her.
The question hung in the air like smoke, and Maya felt something inside her chest crack open just slightly. Because, yes, she had fallen before. She'd fallen downstairs, tripped over nothing, walked into doors, slipped in the shower. She'd become remarkably clumsy since Lily's growth spurt, since Lily had discovered that Maya's smaller frame made her an easy target for frustrations that their parents seemed determined not to see. "Sometimes," Maya whispered. "I'm not very coordinated." Dr. Martinez set down her tablet and moved closer to the bed. "I'm going to examine you now, Maya. I need you to tell me where it hurts most." The examination was thorough and gentle, but each touch to Maya's lower back made her gasp. Dr. Martinez's hands were warm and professional as she pressed carefully around Maya's kidneys, her face growing more concerned with each reaction Maya couldn't suppress. "Maya," Dr. Martinez said finally, "I'm ordering some tests: blood work, urine sample, and an ultrasound. The pattern of pain and tenderness suggests possible kidney injury, and I want to make sure we're not dealing with anything serious." "How serious?" Maya asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "That depends on what we find, but kidney injuries can be significant, especially if they're repeated trauma." Dr. Martinez paused, studying Maya's face with the intensity of someone trying to read between lines. "Maya, I need to ask, are you safe at home?" The question struck Maya like a physical blow. Safe. What did that word even mean? She had a roof over her head, food on the table, parents who loved her in their distracted, overwhelmed way. She had a bedroom with a door that locked, though Lily had figured out how to pick that lock months ago. She had clothes and books and a car, and all the material things that suggested safety. But safe? Safe meant being able to walk through your own house without calculating angles of escape. Safe meant sleeping with one ear listening for footsteps in the hallway. Safe meant not having to explain away bruises that bloomed across your ribs like purple flowers, bruises you covered with carefully chosen clothing and makeup you'd learned to apply with the skill of a professional. "Yes," Maya lied, the word automatic and hollow. "I'm fine. It was just an accident." Dr. Martinez nodded, but Maya could see she wasn't convinced. There was something in the doctor's eyes that suggested she'd heard this particular combination of symptoms and explanations before, that Maya wasn't the first teenager to arrive in her emergency room with mysterious injuries and careful stories. The blood work came back showing elevated levels that made Dr. Martinez frown at her tablet. The urine sample showed traces of blood that made the nurses exchange meaningful glances Maya pretended not to notice. But it was the ultrasound that revealed the truth Maya had been carrying in her body, even when she couldn't voice it with her words. The ultrasound technician, a woman named Beth with purple scrubs and gentle hands, spread the cold gel across Maya's back and moved the wand with practiced precision. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy images that meant nothing to Maya, but everything to the medical professionals gathered around the machine. "Can you see this area here?" Beth murmured to Dr. Martinez, pointing to something on the screen that looked like shadows and abstract shapes to Maya's untrained eye. Dr. Martinez leaned closer, her expression growing grave. "And here, this darker region." Maya watched their faces instead of the screen, reading the story in their furrowed brows and pressed lips. Whatever they were seeing, it wasn't good. It wasn't the result of a simple fall downstairs or a moment of clumsiness. "Maya," Dr. Martinez said finally, turning away from the ultrasound machine to face her directly, "what we're seeing suggests significant bruising to both of your kidneys. This kind of bilateral injury is consistent with repeated blunt force trauma, multiple impacts over time, not a single fall." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge Maya could choose to cross or burn. Bilateral, repeated, trauma. Medical terms that transformed her experience from a family dynamic into a clinical reality, from something she'd learned to navigate and normalize into something that had a name, a pattern, a significance beyond what she'd been taught to accept. I don't understand," Maya said, though she understood perfectly. Her body had been keeping score even when her mind had learned to minimize and rationalize. Her kidneys had been documenting each shove, each playful punch, each moment when Lily's frustrations had found their outlet in Maya's smaller, more vulnerable frame. Dr. Martinez pulled her chair closer to the bed, her voice gentle but firm. "Maya, kidney injuries like this don't happen from single incidents. They're the result of repeated impact, usually over months or longer. Someone has been hurting you, and your body is telling us that story even when your words don't." Maya felt tears she'd been holding back for months finally break free, sliding down her cheeks like the first drops of rain after a long drought. Because Dr. Martinez was right, and Maya was tired of pretending otherwise. She was tired of making excuses for Lily, of convincing herself that her sister's behavior was normal, of accepting her parents' constant refrain that Lily was just going through a phase and Maya needed to be more understanding. "It's my sister," Maya whispered, the words feeling strange and terrifying on her tongue. "But she doesn't mean it. She just gets frustrated and I'm smaller and she says I'm too sensitive when I complain. My parents think we're just typical siblings, you know? They say kids will be kids." Dr. Martinez nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Maya, what you're describing isn't typical sibling behavior. This is abuse, and it's caused real damage to your body. Damage that could have been life-threatening if you hadn't come in tonight." Abuse. The word sat in Maya's chest like a weight she'd been carrying without knowing its name. All this time, she thought there was something wrong with her, that she was too fragile, too sensitive, too weak to handle normal family dynamics. But Dr. Martinez was telling her that normal families didn't send their children to emergency rooms with bruised kidneys and stories about falling downstairs. "What happens now?" Maya asked, suddenly afraid of the answer, because acknowledging what was happening meant everything would change, and change was terrifying, even when the current situation was unsustainable. "Now we make sure you're safe," Dr. Martinez said. "We're going to admit you for observation, and we need to contact social services. What you've experienced isn't okay, Maya, and it's not your fault. You deserve to be safe in your own home." Social services. The word sent panic shooting through Maya's chest because she knew what that meant. Investigations, questions, family meetings where she'd have to repeat her story over and over while Lily and her parents looked at her with expressions ranging from disbelief to betrayal.
It meant disrupting the careful balance she'd maintained, the delicate dance of survival she'd learned to perform. But it also meant something else, something she'd almost forgotten was possible. The chance that someone might believe her, might see what she'd been experiencing, might say that she deserved better than learning to flinch at the sound of footsteps outside her bedroom door. As Dr. Martinez left to make the necessary calls, Maya lay back against the hospital bed and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in each square as she'd learned to count during the worst moments at home, a grounding technique that kept her present when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. Through the thin hospital walls, she could hear the sounds of other people's crises being resolved or complicated, other families dealing with their own emergencies and revelations. But for the first time in months, Maya was not alone with her pain. Someone had seen it, named it, and promised to help her carry it forward into whatever came next. The ultrasound images were still glowing on the nearby screen, shadows and contrasts that told the story of her body's resilience and her sister's capacity for harm. Maya looked at them with new understanding, seeing not just medical evidence, but proof that she had survived, that she had been strong enough to endure and brave enough to finally seek help. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Where are you? Your car is gone, and Lily said you seemed upset at dinner."
Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then turned off her phone without responding. For the first time in years, she didn't owe anyone an explanation for her whereabouts, her feelings, or her decision to prioritize her own safety over family peace. The emergency room continued its steady rhythm around her, nurses checking on patients, doctors reviewing charts, the distant sound of ambulances arriving with new crises. But Maya felt strangely calm, as if she'd finally stopped swimming against a current and allowed herself to float toward whatever shore awaited her. Maya had always been the careful one, the daughter who color-coded her homework assignments and kept her room organized with the precision of someone trying to maintain control in an increasingly chaotic world. Her morning routine was a ritual of small rebellions, disguised as compliance. She woke at 6:15 a.m. every weekday, 15 minutes before her alarm, because those stolen moments of consciousness before the day officially began were hers alone. In those quiet minutes, she would lie in her narrow bed with the faded purple comforter she'd chosen when she was 12, before everything changed, and listen to the sounds of her house waking up around her. Her father's shower would start running at 6:30 exactly, the pipes in their old colonial house groaning with the familiar rhythm of his morning routine. Her mother's footsteps would pad down the hallway toward the kitchen at 6:45, followed by the sound of coffee brewing and the local news program flickering to life on the kitchen television. But it was Lily's schedule that Maya tracked most carefully, the way a small animal learns the hunting patterns of its predators. Lily had become a late sleeper since starting high school, often not emerging from her room until after 7:30, which meant Maya had a precious window of time to shower, dress, and eat breakfast without having to navigate her sister's unpredictable moods. Maya's reflection in her bedroom mirror showed a girl who had learned to make herself smaller in every way possible. She chose clothes that didn't attract attention, muted colors, modest cuts, nothing that might invite comment or scrutiny. She'd grown skilled at concealer, learning to cover the fingerprint bruises on her upper arms, the occasional mark on her collarbone where Lily's thumb had pressed too hard during what their parents saw as playful wrestling. Her bookshelf was a catalog of escape routes, fantasy novels where ordinary girls discovered they had magical powers, science fiction stories about colonies on distant planets, memoirs by women who had survived impossible circumstances and emerged stronger. Maya read voraciously, sometimes finishing 3 books a week, losing herself in other people's stories when her own felt too heavy to carry. The walls of her room were covered with acceptance letters from colleges, full-ride scholarships she'd earned through grades that never dipped below an A-, and extracurricular activities she'd chosen specifically because they kept her away from home. National Honor Society, debate team, volunteer work at the local animal shelter, activities that provided both college application gold and legitimate excuses to be elsewhere when Lily's frustrations needed an outlet. Maya's relationship with her parents was complicated by their fundamental inability to see what was happening in their own house. Her mother, Janet, was a nurse practitioner who could diagnose kidney infections and broken bones in her patients, but somehow remained blind to the careful way Maya moved through their kitchen, the strategic positioning that kept furniture between herself and Lily during family meals. "You girls need to work out your differences," was Janet's constant refrain, delivered with the weary tone of someone who dealt with conflict all day at work and had no energy left for the subtle dynamics playing out under her own roof. She seemed to view Maya and Lily's interactions through the lens of her own childhood with two sisters, remembering sibling rivalry as something normal and temporary, rather than recognizing the systematic pattern of intimidation that had become Maya's daily reality. Maya's father, David, was even more removed from the situation, wrapped up in his work as an accountant and his weekend hobbies of model trains and Civil War documentaries. He was a gentleman who believed in fairness and justice in abstract terms, but struggled to apply those principles to the messy realities of family life. When confronted with evidence of conflict between his daughters, he would suggest they talk it out or give each other space, solutions that worked well for business disputes but fell apart in the face of systematic abuse disguised as sibling dynamics. The breakfast routine was a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance. Maya would eat her cereal standing at the counter, ready to escape to her room or leave for school if Lily appeared earlier than expected. She kept her backpack packed and her car keys in her pocket, always prepared for quick exits that she'd learned to disguise as normal teenage busyness. School was both sanctuary and performance space for Maya. She excelled academically because success felt like armor, because being the smart girl, the reliable girl, the girl who never caused problems created a protective identity that was harder for others to attack. Her teachers praised her dedication and maturity, never questioning why a 17-year-old had developed the hypervigilance of someone much older, why she startled at sudden noises and always chose seats with clear views of exits. Maya's friendship with her best friend Sarah was another delicate balance of truth and concealment. Sarah knew that Maya's family was complicated and that Maya preferred spending time at Sarah's house, where the chaos was loud but harmless, arguments about chores and curfews that ended in laughter rather than hidden bruises. But Maya had never found the words to explain the full truth of her home life, partly because she wasn't sure anyone would believe her, and partly because saying it out loud would make it real in a way she wasn't ready to handle. "Your sister is so lucky to have you," Sarah's mother would often say when Maya helped with dinner or automatically cleaned up after their family movie nights. The comment always made Maya's stomach twist, because she knew that Lily didn't see their relationship in terms of luck, but rather in terms of power, Maya's compliance and availability serving as a pressure valve for whatever frustrations Lily couldn't express elsewhere. The animal shelter where Maya volunteered had become her emotional refuge, a place where she could channel her protective instincts into something healing rather than simply defensive. She worked primarily with the cats, understanding their wariness, their need for safe spaces and gradual trust building. Maya could sit motionless for hours, allowing a frightened kitten to approach at its own pace, recognizing in their hesitation something she felt in her own interactions with the world. "You have a gift with the scared ones," Dr. Peterson, the shelter veterinarian, had told her during one of her shifts. "They sense something safe in you, like you understand what it's like to be afraid." Maya had nodded and continued her work, not trusting herself to respond without revealing more than she intended. But Dr. Peterson's words stayed with her,
a recognition that her experiences, as painful as they were, had given her the ability to comfort others who had learned to expect harm from those who should protect them. Her journal, hidden beneath her mattress in a location she'd changed monthly, was filled with detailed observations about family dynamics, tracking patterns in Lily's behavior the way a meteorologist might chart storm systems. Maya had noticed that Lily's aggression escalated during periods of stress, before big tests, after arguments with friends, when their parents were particularly distracted by their work or their own relationship tensions. These observations had become survival skills, allowing Maya to predict and prepare for the worst times. She could read the signs in Lily's posture, the set of her shoulders when she entered a room, the tone of voice she used when addressing their parents. Maya had learned to make herself scarce during these dangerous weather patterns, finding reasons to be elsewhere until the storm passed and Lily found other outlets for her frustrations. The most devastating part of Maya's situation wasn't the physical pain, though the constant ache in her ribs and the tender spots along her spine were exhausting. It was the gaslighting, the systematic undermining of her own perceptions that had left her questioning her memory, her sensitivity, her right to feel hurt by what was happening to her. "Your sister is so lucky to have you. Whatever you need to explain will be easy enough. You're being dramatic," Lily would say after incidents that left Maya gasping and shaken. "I barely touched you. You're so fragile, it's pathetic."
The false equivalence of these statements, as if Maya's need for safety was somehow equal to Lily's need to express her anger through violence, had taught Maya to distrust her own experience, to second-guess her reactions, to wonder if she was indeed too sensitive, too dramatic, too weak to handle normal family life. Maya's dreams had become increasingly vivid and disturbing, filled with imagery of being chased through endless hallways, of doors that wouldn't lock, of calling for help while her voice made no sound. She would wake with her sheets soaked in sweat, her heart racing, and lie in the darkness listening for sounds that might indicate Lily was awake and moving around the house. Sleep had become another battlefield because Lily had discovered that Maya's bedroom door lock could be picked with a bobby pin, and late-night visits had become part of the pattern of intimidation. Maya had learned to sleep lightly, her body trained to wake at the first sound of footsteps in the hallway. She kept a chair wedged under her door handle and a flashlight under her pillow, small defenses that made her feel slightly more secure, but never truly safe. The physical symptoms had been building for months before the night that sent her to the emergency room. Chronic headaches that she attributed to stress, stomach problems that made eating difficult, a constant state of tension that left her muscles sore and her jaw aching from clenching her teeth. Maya had become expert at explaining away these symptoms, convincing herself and others that she was just stressed about college applications, overwhelmed by her busy schedule, suffering from typical teenage anxiety. But her body had been keeping a more accurate record than her conscious mind was willing to acknowledge. Each shove, each accidental elbow to the ribs, each moment of being grabbed too hard or pushed too forcefully had accumulated in her tissues and organs, creating a medical history that couldn't be rationalized or minimized. Maya's relationship with food had become complicated by the stress and the need to eat quickly before Lily appeared in the kitchen. She'd lost weight over the past year, her clothes hanging looser on her small frame, but when her mother noticed and asked about it, Maya attributed it to being busy and growing taller. The truth was that eating had become associated with vulnerability. Sitting still, being focused on something other than potential threats, occupying a space where she couldn't quickly escape. Her car had become another sanctuary, a small space that was entirely hers, where she could control the music, the temperature, the destination. Maya would often sit in parking lots after school, postponing her return home, listening to music that matched her emotions and allowed her to feel something other than the constant vigilance that home required.
She discovered that certain songs could make her cry, releasing pressure that had been building in her chest. And these mobile crying sessions had become a crucial part of her emotional survival. The college acceptance letters represented more than just academic achievement. They were escape plans, promises of a future where she could sleep without listening for footsteps, where she could eat meals without calculating exit strategies, where she could discover who she might be when not defined by her role as Lily's victim. Maya had applied to schools across the country, knowing that distance would be as important as the quality of education. But leaving also felt like abandonment of the cats at the shelter who trusted her, of Sarah who didn't understand why Maya was so eager to leave their hometown, of the version of herself that had learned to survive impossible circumstances and might have something valuable to offer other people in similar situations. Maya's handwriting had changed over the months, becoming smaller and more controlled, as if she were trying to take up less space, even on paper. Her contributions to class discussions had become more carefully considered, less spontaneous, because she'd learned that drawing attention to herself anywhere could have consequences at home. The confident, outspoken girl she'd been at 14 had been gradually eroded by 2 years of walking on eggshells, hypervigilance, and the constant stress of anticipating the next incident. The night that changed everything, Maya had been trying to help with dinner preparation, a gesture of goodwill that she hoped might ease some of the tension that had been building throughout the day. Lily had been rejected by a boy she'd been interested in, and Maya could read the warning signs in her sister's aggressive movements, the way she slammed cabinets and drawers harder than necessary. "You're in my way," Lily had said, though Maya was standing quietly at the counter, cutting vegetables for the salad.
"I can move," Maya had replied, keeping her voice neutral and non-confrontational. But neutrality hadn't been enough. Lily's frustration needed a target, and Maya's presence in the kitchen provided an opportunity that Lily seized with both hands, shoving Maya backwards with enough force to send her crashing into the counter edge, the impact concentrated precisely where her kidneys were located. The pain had been immediate and breathtaking, but Maya had learned to absorb these moments without crying out, without drawing their parents' attention from the living room where the evening news was providing comfortable background noise to their after-dinner routine. "God, you're clumsy," Lily had said, loud enough for their parents to hear. "Watch where you're going." Maya had nodded and continued making the salad, her hands trembling as she tried to process the intensity of pain radiating from her back. She'd finished dinner preparation, eaten with the family while each bite felt like swallowing glass, helped with cleanup, and retreated to her room where she spent hours curled on her floor, waiting for the pain to subside. But this time, it didn't subside. This time, Maya's body had reached its limit and was demanding attention she could no longer postpone or rationalize away. The social services investigation began 3 days after Maya's emergency room admission, when a woman named Catherine Mills arrived at the Chen household with a clipboard, a kind but serious expression, and questions that would unravel the carefully maintained fiction of their family harmony. Maya watched from her hospital bed as her parents' world shifted beneath their feet, their confusion and indignation playing out in whispered phone conversations and increasingly tense discussions with medical staff. "This is ridiculous," David Chen had said during his first meeting with Dr. Martinez, his accountant's mind struggling to process allegations that didn't fit into neat columns of debits and credits. "Maya is accident-prone. She always has been. And sisters fight. That's normal. We can't be expected to monitor every interaction between two teenagers." But Dr. Martinez had been patient and thorough in her explanations, showing David the ultrasound images that revealed bilateral kidney bruising consistent with repeated trauma, pointing to medical records that documented a pattern of injuries over the past 18 months that no amount of clumsiness could reasonably explain. Janet's reaction had been even more complex, her medical training warring with her maternal instincts and her need to believe that she would have noticed if one of her daughters was systematically hurting the other. She studied Maya's medical chart with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle, looking for alternative explanations that might preserve her understanding of her family dynamics. "Maybe she has a bleeding disorder," Janet suggested during one particularly difficult conversation, "or some kind of connective tissue problem that makes her bruise easily. There could be an underlying medical condition we haven't identified."
Dr. Martinez had ordered additional tests to rule out these possibilities, but they all came back normal. Maya's body was healthy in every way except for the accumulated damage from months of absorbed violence. Her blood clotted normally, her tissues healed at appropriate rates, her bones showed no signs of disease or deficiency. The only thing wrong with Maya's body was what had been done to it by someone else. Catherine Mills, the social worker assigned to Maya's case, had the weathered competence of someone who had seen every variation of family dysfunction and had learned to look beyond surface presentations to underlying patterns. She interviewed each family member separately, taking detailed notes and asking follow-up questions that revealed inconsistencies in their stories and their understanding of what had been happening in their home. Maya's interview with Catherine took place in a small conference room at the hospital, surrounded by motivational posters about healing and recovery that felt both comforting and surreal. Catherine had gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that were simultaneously gentle and relentless in their pursuit of truth.
"Tell me about your relationship with your sister," Catherine said, settling into her chair with the patience of someone prepared to listen for as long as necessary. Maya had spent 3 days in the hospital preparing for this conversation, but when the moment arrived, the words still felt foreign on her tongue. She started with small incidents, testing Catherine's reaction, watching for signs of disbelief or dismissal that would tell her to retreat into the safer territory of minimization and family loyalty. But Catherine listened without judgment, taking notes and asking clarifying questions that helped Maya understand that her experiences had names, patterns, and significance beyond what she'd been taught to believe. Physical intimidation, systematic escalation, isolation techniques, financial control through selective access to car keys and spending money. Catherine had a vocabulary for Maya's experience that transformed it from personal failing to recognizable abuse. "How long has this been going on?" Catherine asked. Maya considered the question, realizing that the answer depended on how you defined this. The physical violence had escalated over the past 2 years, but the underlying dynamic went back much further. Lily has always been the more dominant sister, the one who got first choice of activities, the one whose needs took precedence in family planning. But there had been a shift when Lily hit puberty and her size advantage became pronounced, when she discovered that Maya's smaller frame and conflict-avoidant personality made her an ideal target for releasing frustrations that couldn't be expressed elsewhere. "It got bad about 2 years ago," Maya said, "but looking back, I think it was always there in smaller ways. I just learned to see it as normal." Catherine nodded as if this progression was familiar to her. "Tell me about your parents' response when you've tried to discuss this with them." This question was harder to answer because it required Maya to acknowledge her own attempts to communicate her distress and her parents' consistent failure to hear her. She described conversations where she'd tried to explain that Lily was hurting her, only to be told that she was being too sensitive. She recounted incidents where she'd shown her mother bruises, only to have them dismissed as normal results of active teenagers who played too roughly. "They want us to get along," Maya said. "They see it as a discipline problem, not a safety problem. They think if we just tried harder to understand each other, everything would be fine." Catherine's pen moved steadily across her notepad, documenting not just Maya's words, but the way she delivered them. The long pauses while she searched for language that wouldn't betray family loyalty, the careful modulation of her voice to avoid sounding like she was complaining or seeking attention, and the automatic minimization that had become second nature after years of having her concerns dismissed. The interview with Lily took place the same day, and Maya could hear raised voices through the hospital walls as her sister encountered questions she couldn't deflect or redirect. Lily had always been skilled at managing adult perceptions, presenting herself as mature and responsible while reserving her more controlling behaviors for interactions with Maya that happened outside adult supervision. But Catherine Mills had spent 20 years learning to see through these presentations, and her questions cut straight to the heart of Lily's methods and motivations. She asked about specific incidents that Maya had described, watching Lily's body language for signs of recognition or defensiveness. She inquired about Lily's understanding of appropriate boundaries between siblings, her methods for managing frustration and anger, her awareness of the physical and emotional impact her behavior had on Maya. Lily's responses, according to Dr. Martinez, who was present during the interview, followed a predictable pattern.
initial denial that anything serious had occurred, minimization of incidents that couldn't be denied, blame shifting that characterized Maya as oversensitive and attention-seeking, and finally, defensive anger when these strategies failed to satisfy Catherine's persistent questioning. "She's lying," Lily had apparently said at one point. "Maya always exaggerates everything. She's trying to get me in trouble because she's jealous that I'm more successful, more popular, better at sports. This is all revenge because our parents pay more attention to me."
Catherine had documented these responses along with everything else, building a comprehensive picture of family dynamics that revealed patterns Maya herself hadn't fully recognized. The jealousy and competition that Lily described were real, but they flowed in the opposite direction from what Lily claimed. It was Lily who resented Maya's academic success, her scholarship opportunities, her reputation among teachers and community members as responsible and mature. Maya's achievements had become a source of irritation for Lily, who struggled in school despite having more social advantages. Maya's college acceptance letters represented escape and success that Lily couldn't match, and Maya's quiet competence highlighted Lily's own insecurities about her future prospects. The violence hadn't been random or impulsive. It had been a systematic attempt to undermine Maya's confidence and well-being, to ensure that Maya remained in a subordinate position despite her academic and personal accomplishments. The interview with their parents revealed the complex ways that well-meaning adults could fail to protect vulnerable children even when they loved them and believed they were providing appropriate supervision. David and Janet Chen were not malicious or deliberately neglectful, but their responses to their daughter's conflicts had been shaped by their own childhood experiences, their cultural backgrounds, and their assumptions about normal family dynamics. David had grown up in a family where physical competition between siblings was considered character building, where children were expected to resolve conflicts independently without involving parents in every disagreement. His memories of his own childhood centered on outdoor adventures and rough play that taught resilience and self-reliance. He genuinely couldn't understand how the interactions between Maya and Lily differed from the normal sibling rivalry he remembered from his youth. Janet's perspective was complicated by her professional medical training, which focused on identifying and treating acute medical problems rather than recognizing patterns of chronic stress and trauma. She could diagnose a broken arm or identify signs of meningitis, but she'd missed the subtle indicators of ongoing abuse happening in her own home. Maya's frequent minor injuries, her changes in appetite and sleep patterns, her increasing social withdrawal, all of these had been explained away as typical teenage adjustment issues, rather than recognized as symptoms of systematic victimization. "We love both our daughters equally," Janet had told Catherine during their interview. "We've tried to be fair, to not take sides when they have disagreements. Maybe we should have been more involved, but we wanted them to learn to work things out between themselves." Catherine's report, which Maya was allowed to read before it was submitted to the court, painted a picture of a family system that had allowed systematic abuse to flourish under the guise of normal sibling rivalry. The document was clinical in its language, but devastating in its conclusions, describing how Maya had been isolated, intimidated, and physically harmed, while the adults responsible for her protection had consistently minimized her distress and failed to intervene effectively. The report detailed specific incidents that Maya had described, cross-referenced with medical records that documented the physical evidence of ongoing trauma. It analyzed the family's communication patterns, noting how Maya's attempts to seek help had been consistently dismissed or redirected into discussions about family harmony and sibling cooperation. It described Lily's escalating behavior and her sophisticated understanding of how to hurt Maya in ways that wouldn't attract adult attention or intervention. But perhaps most importantly, the report acknowledged Maya's strength and resilience in surviving 18 months of systematic abuse while maintaining her academic performance, her community involvement, and her hope for a different future. Catherine had recognized something that Maya herself had begun to doubt, that her survival strategies represented remarkable courage and intelligence,
not weakness or complicity. The day Maya was discharged from the hospital, a family meeting was held in the hospital's social services conference room. The atmosphere was tense and formal, with Catherine presiding over a discussion that would determine Maya's immediate living arrangements and the conditions under which she might safely return home. Dr. Martinez presented the medical evidence first, explaining the extent of Maya's kidney injuries and the long-term health implications if similar trauma occurred again. She spoke directly to David and Janet, her voice professional but firm, as she described the severity of damage that had accumulated in Maya's body over months of absorbed violence.
The next incident could cause permanent kidney damage, Dr. Martinez said. Maya's organs have sustained repeated trauma, and they're functioning at reduced capacity. Any additional injury to this area could result in chronic kidney disease or complete organ failure. The medical terminology had a sobering effect on Maya's parents, translating their daughter's conflicts from the realm of family dynamics into the concrete reality of potential permanent disability. For the first time, David seemed to understand that this wasn't about normal sibling rivalry or teenage dramatics. His daughter's life and long-term health were at stake. Catherine outlined the options available to the family. Maya could return home immediately if Lily agreed to intensive counseling and anger management therapy, if the parents committed to family therapy sessions, and if a detailed safety plan was implemented that included regular check-ins with social services. Alternatively, Maya could stay with relatives while the family worked on resolving these issues, or she could be placed in temporary foster care if no suitable family placement was available. "I want to go home," Maya said, surprising everyone in the room, including herself. "But I need to know that things will actually change. I can't go back to pretending everything is normal when it's not." Her words carried a weight that seemed to settle over the entire room. For years, Maya had been asked to adjust, to be more understanding, to accommodate Lily's needs and moods. Now she was stating clearly that the burden of change needed to fall on others, that her safety and well-being were non-negotiable requirements for any family reconciliation. Lily's response was immediate and defensive. "I never meant to hurt her seriously. We were just playing around, and she's making it sound like I was trying to kill her or something. This is all blown out of proportion." But Catherine had heard these protestations before, and she responded with questions that cut through Lily's attempts at minimization. "When Maya told you that you were hurting her, what did you do?" she asked. "When she showed you bruises or said she was in pain, how did you respond?" Lily's answers revealed the deliberate nature of her behavior. She admitted that Maya had asked her to stop, had shown her bruises, had tried to avoid physical interactions, but instead of modifying her behavior, she had escalated it, interpreting Maya's distress as weakness and her requests for gentleness as challenges to Lily's authority within the family hierarchy. She needed to toughen up. She was too soft, too sensitive. I thought I was helping her learn to stand up for herself. Catherine's pen moved steadily across her notepad as she documented these responses, building a record that would be used to determine appropriate interventions and consequences. Lily's words revealed a sophisticated understanding of power dynamics and a calculated approach to maintaining dominance over her sister. This wasn't impulsive behavior or accidental harm, but systematic abuse disguised as family development. The safety plan that emerged from this meeting was comprehensive and detailed, covering everything from physical boundaries to communication protocols to consequences for any violations. Lily would attend individual therapy twice a week with a counselor who specialized in adolescent anger management and sibling violence. The entire family would participate in weekly family therapy sessions focused on communication, boundary setting, and conflict resolution. Maya would have direct access to Catherine Mills through a phone number she could call at any time, day or night, if she felt unsafe or needed intervention. Regular check-ins were scheduled, including unannounced home visits that would allow Catherine to assess the family's progress and Maya's well-being. Academic accommodations were arranged to help Maya manage any ongoing stress or medical issues related to her kidney recovery.
perhaps most importantly, Maya's parents would attend a series of educational sessions about sibling abuse, domestic violence dynamics, and the long-term impacts of childhood trauma. Their well-meaning but inadequate responses to their daughter's conflicts were based on outdated information and cultural assumptions that needed to be systematically challenged and updated.
But implementing the safety plan proved more challenging than creating it. The first week back home was a careful dance of new boundaries and old patterns, with everyone hyper-aware of being watched and evaluated while simultaneously struggling to change deeply ingrained habits of interaction. Lily's resentment about the therapy requirements and social services involvement simmered beneath the surface of compliance, expressing itself in passive-aggressive behaviors that were harder to document but equally destabilizing. She would comply with the letter of the safety plan while violating its spirit, maintaining physical distance from Maya while using subtle intimidation tactics that fell just short of actionable violations. "You're going to regret this," Lily whispered to Maya during one of their first encounters after returning home, her voice low enough that their parents couldn't hear from the kitchen where they were preparing dinner. "You think you won, but you've just made everything worse for yourself." Maya documented these interactions in a journal that Catherine had suggested she keep, recording not just overt violations, but also the atmosphere of tension and threat that Lily continued to maintain through glances, body language, and carefully chosen words that carried implicit threats while remaining technically within the boundaries of the safety plan. The family therapy sessions were uncomfortable laboratories for practicing new communication patterns under professional supervision. Dr. Sandra Reeves, their family therapist, had extensive experience with sibling violence cases and was skilled at creating safe spaces for difficult conversations while maintaining accountability for all family members. "Maya, can you tell your parents specifically what you need from them to feel safe at home?" Dr. Reeves asked during their third session. Maya had been preparing for this question, but voicing her needs still felt dangerous after years of having them dismissed or minimized. "I need them to believe me when I say something is wrong," she said. "I need them to not assume that both sides are equally responsible when something happens. And I need consequences for Lily when she violates the safety plan, not just more conversations about how we all need to get along better." Her parents' responses revealed how much they still struggled to understand the power dynamics that had developed in their home. David wanted to focus on future prevention rather than acknowledging past failures. Janet kept returning to medical explanations for Maya's injuries, still searching for alternative causes that would absolve the family of responsibility for systematic abuse. But Dr. Reeves was patient and persistent, using research about sibling violence and family systems to help Maya's parents understand that their good intentions hadn't translated into effective protection for their daughter. She showed them studies about the long-term impacts of childhood trauma, statistics about sibling abuse that happened in families exactly like theirs, and evidence-based strategies for creating genuinely safe home environments. Lily's individual therapy with Dr. Marcus Thompson focused on anger management, empathy development, and accountability for her actions. Dr. Thompson had worked with adolescent perpetrators of family violence for over a decade, and he understood the complex mix of insecurity, entitlement, and learned behavior that often drove these patterns. The therapy wasn't about demonizing Lily or reducing her to the role of abuser, but rather about helping her understand the impact of her choices and develop healthier strategies for managing frustration and competition. Dr. Thompson worked with Lily to identify the triggers that had led to violent episodes, the thought patterns that had justified her behavior, and the underlying needs that she'd been trying to meet through dominance and control. But progress was slow and uneven. Lily struggled with taking responsibility for her actions,
often falling back into minimizing and blame shifting when confronted with the full impact of her behavior on Maya's physical and emotional well-being. She had difficulty accepting that her intentions didn't excuse the harm she had caused, that claiming to help Maya toughen up didn't justify systematic violence that had resulted in kidney damage. Meanwhile, Maya was discovering that healing wasn't a linear process. Some days she felt strong and optimistic about her family's ability to change. Other days she felt overwhelmed by the emotional work required to rebuild relationships that had been damaged by months of fear and pain. The constant vigilance she'd developed as a survival mechanism couldn't be turned off overnight, and she found herself still tracking Lily's moods and movements even when safety plans and therapy sessions suggested she should be able to relax.
School became a different kind of challenge as word spread about Maya's hospitalization and the social services investigation. Teachers who had always seen her as a model student now looked at her with a mixture of concern and curiosity that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, scheduled regular check-ins that were well-intentioned but reminded Maya constantly that she was now identified as a victim, a role that felt limiting and defining in ways she hadn't anticipated. "How are things at home?" Mrs. Patterson would ask, her voice carefully neutral, but her eyes searching Maya's face for signs of ongoing distress. Maya appreciated the concern but struggled with the loss of privacy that came with being under protective surveillance. Every bruise, every tired day, every moment of sadness was now viewed through the lens of potential abuse, rather than normal teenage experiences. She understood that this attention was necessary for her safety, but it also meant she could never again be just a regular student dealing with regular teenage problems. Her friendship with Sarah became more complicated as Maya struggled with how much to reveal about what had been happening in her family. Sarah had known that Maya's relationship with Lily was difficult, but the severity of the situation came as a shock that left Sarah feeling guilty about not recognizing the signs of abuse and uncertain about how to provide appropriate support. "I should have known," Sarah said during one of their first conversations after Maya returned to school. "I should have asked more questions when you kept having those mysterious injuries. I feel like I failed you as a friend." Maya found herself in the strange position of comforting Sarah for not recognizing signs that Maya herself had worked hard to hide. The conversation revealed how successfully Maya had concealed the extent of her situation, how effectively she'd maintained the appearance of normal teenage life while navigating systematic abuse at home. But it also opened new possibilities for honest friendship, for relationships based on truth rather than careful management of perceptions. Sarah proved to be remarkably adaptable, learning to recognize Maya's triggers, understanding when she needed space or distraction, and becoming an advocate for Maya's needs in group social situations where questions about her family situation might arise. The volunteer work at the animal shelter took on new meaning as Maya recognized connections between her own experience and the rehabilitation of animals who had been mistreated. She found herself drawn to the most damaged cats, the ones who flinched at sudden movements and needed weeks of patient interaction before they could accept human touch without fear. Dr. Peterson, the shelter veterinarian, noticed Maya's particular skill with traumatized animals and offered her additional training in animal behavior and rehabilitation techniques. The work became therapeutic for Maya, allowing her to channel her understanding of trauma into healing relationships with creatures who couldn't speak about their experiences, but communicated their pain and gradual recovery through behavior changes that Maya had learned to read like a second language. "You have an intuitive understanding of trust building," Dr. Peterson told her during one training session. "These animals sense that you know what it's like to be afraid, and they respond to that authenticity." Maya began to understand that her experiences, as painful as they had been, were giving her tools for understanding and helping others who had survived similar trauma. The skills she'd developed for reading subtle signs of aggression, for de-escalating tense situations, for maintaining hope in the face of ongoing challenges, these were transferable abilities that could serve her in future careers and relationships. But the path forward wasn't straightforward or guaranteed. 8 weeks after returning home, Maya experienced her first major setback when Lily violated the safety plan during a family dinner that escalated into a physical confrontation despite months of therapy and intervention.
The incident began with a seemingly innocent discussion about college plans. Maya had received additional scholarship offers, including a full ride to a prestigious university 3 states away. As she shared the news with her family, describing the opportunities the scholarship would provide and the relief she felt about being able to afford her education, Lily's body language grew increasingly tense.
Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Of course Saint Maya gets everything handed to her, Lily muttered, her voice low but audible enough for everyone at the table to hear. Maya felt her stomach tighten with familiar anxiety, but she tried to redirect the conversation in a way that wouldn't escalate the tension. There are still scholarships available for next year, she offered. I could help you with applications if you want. But Lily's frustration had been building for weeks, and Maya's offer of help was interpreted as condescension rather than sisterly support. I don't need your help. I don't need you to solve my problems or act like you're better than me. David attempted to intervene using the communication techniques they'd learned in family therapy. Lily, can you use I statements to express what you're feeling? Maya was trying to be supportive. But therapy techniques felt artificial and inadequate in the face of Lily's genuine rage about her sister's continued success and her own uncertain future. The careful boundaries and communication protocols they'd practiced in Dr. Reeves' office crumbled under the pressure of real family dynamics playing out at their kitchen table. I'm sick of everyone acting like Maya's perfect, Lily said, her voice rising. She's manipulative and fake, and she's turned you all against me. Everything was fine before she decided to play victim and get social services involved. Maya felt the familiar flutter of panic in her chest as Lily's anger focused on her. She pushed back from the table slightly, creating distance while trying to appear calm and non-confrontational. I'm not trying to be perfect, she said. I'm just trying to do well in school so I can get into college. You're trying to make me look bad in comparison, Lily shot back. You think if you're the good daughter, everyone will forget what a whiny, pathetic little victim you really are. The words hit Maya like physical blows, targeting the insecurities she'd been working through in her own therapy sessions. Part of her wondered if Lily was right, if her academic success was partly motivated by a need to prove her worth after months of being told she was weak and oversensitive. Janet tried to de-escalate the situation using techniques from their family therapy sessions. Let's all take a break and come back to this conversation when everyone feels calmer. But Lily had moved beyond the point where parental intervention could contain her emotions. As Maya stood to leave the table, following her mother's suggestion, Lily blocked her path with the calculated aggression that had characterized their worst interactions before the safety plan was implemented. You're not going anywhere until we finish this, Lily said, positioning herself between Maya and the kitchen doorway. Maya felt her heart rate spike as she recognized the familiar pattern of intimidation that had preceded previous violent episodes. Please move, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear flooding her system. So you can run away like you always do? You can't handle any real conversation, so you run to your room and then tell everyone how mean I am to you. David attempted to intervene, using the communication techniques they learned in family therapy. Lily, can you use I statements to express what you're feeling? Maya was trying to be supportive. But Lily's therapeutic progress had been superficial, and under stress, she reverted to the power dynamics that had defined her relationship with Maya for years. Instead of moving aside, she stepped closer to Maya, using her size advantage to create a sense of physical threat that was unmistakable to everyone in the room. You've ruined everything, Lily said, her voice dropping to the low, intense tone that Maya had learned to fear. My parents hate me now because of your lies. My therapist thinks I'm some kind of monster. Everyone at school knows there's something wrong with our family. You did this. Maya tried to move around Lily, but her sister shifted position to continue blocking her exit, a clear violation of the safety plan that required Lily to maintain physical distance and never impede Maya's ability to leave a situation that felt threatening. "Lily, you need to step back right now," Janet said, her medical training kicking in as she recognized the escalating dynamics that could lead to violence. But instead of stepping back, Lily reached out and grabbed Maya's wrist with enough force to leave marks, her fingers digging into the same area where previous bruises had finally faded. "You don't get to walk away from me," she said. "You started this, and you're going to deal with the consequences." Maya tried to pull away, but Lily's grip tightened, and the familiar pain of fingers pressed too hard against bone brought back months of fear and helplessness that therapy hadn't yet fully addressed. "Let go," Maya said, her voice beginning to shake. "You're hurting me." Instead of releasing her grip, Lily used Maya's attempt to pull away as leverage to jerk her forward, off balance and into range for the kind of close contact violence that had sent Maya to the emergency room 3 months earlier. It was a calculated movement that took advantage of Maya's smaller size and Lily's understanding of exactly how to inflict maximum pain while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions. David moved quickly, physically inserting himself between his daughters and forcing Lily to release Maya's wrist. But the damage had been done. The safety plan had been violated, Maya's trust in her family's ability to protect her had been shattered, and Lily had demonstrated that months of therapy hadn't fundamentally changed her willingness to use violence when frustrated or challenged. Maya stood in the kitchen doorway, cradling her wrist and staring at her family with a mixture of disappointment and recognition. She'd hoped that the therapy, the safety plan, and the social services involvement would create genuine change in their family dynamics. But this incident revealed that the surface compliance they'd achieved wasn't the same as deep transformation, and that Lily's capacity for violence remained intact beneath the veneer of therapeutic progress. "I'm calling Catherine," Maya said, her voice steady despite the tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "This isn't working. I can't live like this anymore." The phone call to Catherine Mills brought immediate consequences that demonstrated the effectiveness of having external accountability systems in place. Within 2 hours, Catherine was at their house conducting emergency interviews with each family member and documenting the violation of the safety plan that everyone acknowledged had occurred. Maya's wrist showed clear finger mark bruises that Catherine photographed as evidence. Lily's admission that she had grabbed Maya and prevented her from leaving the kitchen constituted multiple violations of the agreements they'd made. The incident occurred in front of both parents, making it impossible to dismiss or minimize the way previous episodes had been handled. The consequence was swift and decisive. Lily would be removed from the home temporarily while the family's therapeutic progress was reassessed and more intensive interventions were implemented. "This isn't fair," Lily protested as she packed her belongings under Catherine's supervision. "I barely touched her. She's making this into something huge just to get attention." But Catherine had seen these patterns before, and she responded with the firm clarity that came from years of experience with family violence cases. "Lily, you violated multiple aspects of the safety plan that you agreed to follow. You prevented Maya from leaving a situation where she felt threatened. You grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises, and you did this after months of therapy that should have given you better tools for managing your anger."
Home without the constant vigilance that Lily's presence required. But she also felt guilty about the disruption her honesty had caused to their family structure, and sad about the recognition that her sister might never be someone she could trust or feel safe around. The weeks that followed Lily's removal from the home gave Maya her first extended period of genuine safety and relaxation since the abuse had begun escalating 2 years earlier. She could walk through the kitchen without calculating exit strategies. She could sleep through the night without listening for footsteps in the hallway. She could eat meals with her parents without monitoring the emotional temperature of every conversation. But this period also revealed how much damage had been done to Maya's nervous system and emotional well-being. Without the constant need for hypervigilance, she began experiencing symptoms that she'd suppressed during the months of ongoing threat. Nightmares increased as her subconscious mind processed trauma that conscious awareness had needed to minimize for survival. Anxiety attacks occurred when she let her guard down, her body finally allowing itself to feel the fear it had been managing through adrenaline and dissociation. Dr. Sarah Kim, Maya's individual therapist, explained that these symptoms were normal parts of trauma recovery. "Your body is finally safe enough to process what it's been through," she said. "The hypervigilance and emotional numbing that helped you survive aren't needed anymore, so your nervous system is allowing itself to feel and release what it's been carrying." Maya's parents struggled with their own guilt and confusion as they witnessed the extent of trauma their daughter had been carrying while trying to appear normal and functional. They hadn't realized how much energy Maya had been expending just to maintain basic safety in their home, or how significantly her academic and social achievements had been accomplished despite the chronic stress of living with systematic abuse. "I keep thinking about all the times she tried to tell us," Janet said during one of their therapy sessions. "All the times we told her to work it out with Lily, to be more understanding, to stop being so sensitive. We were asking her to accept being hurt and to take responsibility for her sister's violence." David's reaction was equally painful as he recognized how his assumptions about normal sibling rivalry had prevented him from seeing the genuine danger his daughter had been facing. "I thought I was teaching them independence and resilience," he said. "I didn't understand that I was actually teaching Maya that her safety didn't matter, and that no one would protect her if she couldn't protect herself." The family therapy sessions during Lily's absence focused on rebuilding trust between Maya and her parents, establishing new communication patterns that prioritized Maya's safety and well-being, and preparing for the possibility that Lily might not be able to return home if she couldn't demonstrate genuine change in her attitudes and behaviors. Dr. Reeves helped Maya's parents understand that their good intentions hadn't translated into effective protection, and that rebuilding Maya's trust would require consistent actions over time rather than apologies and promises. Maya needed to see that her parents could prioritize her safety even when it meant making difficult decisions about Lily's living arrangements and future relationship with the family. The breakthrough came 6 weeks into Lily's stay with their aunt, during a joint therapy session that Catherine Mills had arranged to assess the possibility of family reunification. Maya sat in Dr. Reeves' office between her parents, while Lily participated via video call from their aunt's house, her face appearing on a laptop screen that somehow made the conversation feel both more intimate and more distant. Dr. Marcus Thompson, Lily's individual therapist, joined the session to provide updates on her progress and assess her readiness to take full responsibility for her actions without minimization or blame shifting. The mood in the room was tense with anticipation. Everyone understood that this conversation would determine whether their family could be safely reunited or whether more permanent alternative arrangements would need to be made. "Lily," Dr. Thompson began, "we've been working together for 4 months now, including the past 6 weeks of intensive daily sessions. Can you tell your family what you've learned about your behavior and its impact on Maya?" Maya watched her sister's face on the screen, searching for signs of the genuine change that would be necessary for any possibility of rebuilding their relationship. Lily looked different somehow, older, more serious, without the underlying tension that had characterized her presence for the past 2 years.
"I've learned that I was abusing Maya," Lily said, the words coming slowly, but without the defensive qualifications that had characterized her previous attempts at accountability. "Not just fighting with her or being a typical sister. I was systematically hurting her because I was jealous of her success and because I could get away with it." Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. This was the first time Lily had used the word abuse to describe her own behavior. The first time she'd acknowledged the systematic nature of what had been happening rather than characterizing it as isolated incidents or a mutual conflict. "Can you be more specific about what you did?" Dr. Reeves asked. Lily's answer was detailed and unflinching in a way that surprised everyone in the room. She described specific incidents of violence, acknowledging the calculated nature of her targeting and timing. She admitted to using Maya's smaller size as an advantage, to escalating her aggression when their parents weren't present, to deliberately causing injuries in areas that wouldn't be immediately visible. I knew exactly what I was doing, Lily said. I told myself I was helping Maya toughen up, but that was just an excuse. The truth is that I was angry about her getting into better colleges than me, angry that teachers and coaches praised her more than me, angry that she seemed to have her life figured out while I was struggling. Maya found herself crying as she listened to her sister finally acknowledge the reality of what had been happening between them. For months, she'd wondered if she was crazy, if she was exaggerating her experiences, if maybe she really was too sensitive and weak to handle normal family dynamics. Hearing Lily describe the deliberate nature of her actions validated Maya's perceptions and confirmed that her fear and pain had been entirely justified. "Maya," Dr. Thompson said gently, "how does it feel to hear Lily acknowledge what she did to you?" Maya wiped her eyes and took a moment to consider the question. Part of her felt relieved to finally have her experience acknowledged and validated. Part of her felt sad about the years of gaslighting and self-doubt that could have been avoided if this honesty had come sooner. And part of her felt angry about the damage that had been done, not just to her body, but to her ability to trust her own perceptions and advocate for her own needs. "It feels good to hear the truth," Maya said finally, "but it also makes me realize how much time I spent thinking there was something wrong with me. I kept wondering if I was making things up or being dramatic. It hurts to know that Lily knew she was hurting me and chose to keep doing it anyway." David reached over and squeezed Maya's hand, his own eyes filled with tears as he absorbed the full implications of what his daughters were discussing. "Maya, I owe you an enormous apology," he said. "We failed you completely. We should have seen what was happening and protected you instead of asking you to just get along with someone who was systematically hurting you." Janet's response was equally emotional as she grappled with the professional irony of being a healthcare provider who had missed clear signs of abuse in her own home. "I keep thinking about all the times you tried to tell us. All the times we dismissed your concerns or told you to work it out yourselves. We taught you that your safety didn't matter as much as family harmony." But perhaps the most significant moment came when Dr. Thompson asked Lily about her understanding of the long-term impact her behavior had on Maya's physical and emotional well-being. "I gave her kidney damage that could affect her for the rest of her life. I made her afraid in her own home. I made her question her own memories and feelings. I stole her sense of safety and trust, and I don't know if she'll ever be able to get that back completely."
Maya looked at her sister's image on the screen and saw something she hadn't seen before. Genuine remorse that went beyond self-pity or concern about consequences. Lily was finally understanding that her actions had caused real harm to a real person, not just violating abstract rules or disappointing authority figures. "The hardest part for me to accept," Lily continued, "is that Maya still tried to protect me even when I was hurting her. She didn't want to get me in trouble. She kept making excuses for me to our parents and to the doctors. She was more loyal to me than I ever was to her." This observation hit Maya with unexpected force because it was true. Even while being systematically abused, she had tried to minimize Lily's actions to protect her from consequences. Even while being hospitalized for kidney damage, her first instinct had been to lie about how the injuries occurred. Her loyalty to family had been so strong that she'd prioritized Lily's welfare over her own safety, a pattern that Dr. Kim had been helping her recognize and change in her individual therapy. "Why do you think Maya protected you even when you were hurting her?" Dr. Reeves asked. "Because she's a better person than I am," Lily said simply. "Because she loves our family and didn't want to destroy it. Because she's been trained her whole life to put other people's needs before her own, and I took advantage of that."
The session continued for 2 more hours, with each family member having the opportunity to ask questions, express feelings, and discuss what would be needed for them to feel safe and respected if they were to live together again. Maya's questions for Lily were direct and challenging, testing whether her sister's apparent change was superficial or genuine. "How do I know you won't hurt me again when you get frustrated?" Maya asked. Lily's answer demonstrated a level of self-awareness that hadn't been present in her earlier therapeutic work. She described specific triggers that led to her violent episodes, coping strategies she'd learned for managing anger and jealousy, and concrete behavioral changes she'd implemented during her stay with their aunt. She acknowledged that Maya had no obligation to trust her, and that rebuilding their relationship would require consistent actions over time, not just promises and apologies. "If you ever feel unsafe around me, even for a second, you should call Catherine or Dr. Reeves immediately. My feelings about that don't matter. Your safety is more important than my comfort or my relationship with the family." Maya's parents also had to answer difficult questions about their willingness to prioritize Maya's safety over family unity, their understanding of abuse dynamics, and their commitment to maintaining the therapeutic progress they'd made during Lily's absence. Dr. Reeves questioned them extensively about their response plans if future incidents occurred, their ability to recognize early warning signs of escalating conflict, and their acceptance of the possibility that permanent separation might be necessary if Lily couldn't maintain appropriate boundaries. "We understand now that our job is to protect Maya, not to preserve family harmony at her expense. If Lily can't live here safely, then she can't live here at all. Maya's well-being comes first." The session ended with a tentative plan for graduated reunification, beginning with supervised day visits and eventually progressing to Lily's return home if all participants demonstrated sustained progress. But Maya had the authority to halt the process at any point if she felt unsafe or if Lily showed signs of reverting to previous patterns. Catherine Mills outlined the enhanced safety plan that would govern any reunification attempt. Monthly family therapy sessions would continue indefinitely. Lily would maintain individual therapy twice a week for at least a year. Maya would have a direct line to social services that bypassed parental involvement. Random home visits would continue to ensure compliance with safety agreements. But perhaps most importantly, Maya's voice would be the determining factor in any decisions about family living arrangements. After months of having her concerns dismissed or minimized, she now had official authority to determine what felt safe and acceptable in her own home. The weeks following this breakthrough session were a period of cautious optimism mixed with realistic acknowledgement of the work that still needed to be done. Lily's first supervised visits home were awkward but peaceful, with all family members hyper-aware of their interactions and committed to practicing the communication skills they'd learned in therapy.
Maya found herself studying Lily's behavior with the intensity of a researcher, looking for signs of genuine change versus surface compliance. She noticed that Lily's body language was different, less aggressive, more aware of personal space and physical boundaries. Her sister's tone of voice had lost the underlying threat that had characterized their interactions for years. Most importantly, Lily demonstrated the ability to manage frustration and disappointment without directing anger toward Maya. The first real test came during Maya's 18th birthday celebration, when the family gathered to acknowledge her acceptance of the full-ride scholarship to her first-choice university. In the past, Maya's achievements had been triggers for Lily's worst behavior, but this milestone required Lily to demonstrate her ability to celebrate her sister's success without resentment or retaliation. "I'm proud of you," Lily said during the family dinner, her words carrying a sincerity that surprised everyone at the table.
You earned this scholarship despite everything I put you through. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." The breakthrough came 6 weeks into Lily's stay with her aunt during a joint therapy session that Catherine Mills had arranged to assess the possibility of family reunification. Maya sat in Dr. Reeves' office between her parents, while Lily participated via video call from their aunt's house, her face appearing on a laptop screen that somehow made the conversation feel both more intimate and more distant. Dr. Marcus Thompson, Lily's individual therapist, joined the session to provide updates on her progress and assess her readiness to take full responsibility for her actions without minimization or blame shifting. The mood in the room was tense with anticipation. Everyone understood that this conversation would determine whether their family could be safely reunited or whether more permanent alternative arrangements would need to be made. "Lily," Dr. Thompson began, "we've been working together for 4 months now, including the past 6 weeks of intensive daily sessions. Can you tell your family what you've learned about your behavior and its impact on Maya?" Maya watched her sister's face on the screen, searching for signs of the genuine change that would be necessary for any possibility of rebuilding their relationship. Lily looked different somehow. Older, more serious, without the underlying tension that had characterized her presence for the past 2 years. "I've learned that I was abusing Maya," Lily said, the words coming slowly, but without the defensive qualifications that had characterized her previous attempts at accountability. "Not just fighting with her or being a typical sister. I was systematically hurting her because I was jealous of her success and because I could get away with it." Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. This was the first time Lily had used the word abuse to describe her own behavior, the first time she'd acknowledged the systematic nature of what had been happening rather than characterizing it as isolated incidents or mutual conflict. "Can you be more specific about what you did?" Dr. Reeves asked. Lily's answer was detailed and unflinching in a way that surprised everyone in the room. She described specific incidents of violence, acknowledging the calculated nature of her targeting and timing. She admitted to using Maya's smaller size as an advantage, to escalating her aggression when their parents weren't present, to deliberately causing injuries in areas that wouldn't be immediately visible. "I knew exactly what I was doing," Lily said. "I told myself I was helping Maya toughen up, but that was just an excuse. The truth is that I was angry about her getting into better colleges than me, angry that teachers and coaches praised her more than me, angry that she seemed to have her life figured out while I was struggling." Maya found herself crying as she listened to her sister finally acknowledge the reality of what had been happening between them. For months, she'd wondered if she was crazy, if she was exaggerating her experiences, if maybe she really was too sensitive and weak to handle normal family dynamics. Hearing Lily describe the deliberate nature of her actions validated Maya's perceptions and confirmed that her fear and pain had been entirely justified.
"Maya," Dr. Thompson said gently, "how does it feel to hear Lily acknowledge what she did to you?" Maya wiped her eyes and took a moment to consider the question. Part of her felt relieved to finally have her experience acknowledged and validated. Part of her felt sad about the years of gaslighting and self-doubt that could have been avoided if this honesty had come sooner. And part of her felt angry about the damage that had been done not just to her body, but to her ability to trust her own perceptions and advocate for her own needs. "It feels good to hear the truth," Maya said finally, "but it also makes me realize how much time I spent thinking there was something wrong with me. I kept wondering if I was making things up or being dramatic. It hurts to know that Lily knew she was hurting me and chose to keep doing it anyway." David reached over and squeezed Maya's hand, his own eyes filled with tears as he absorbed the full implications of what his daughters were discussing. "Maya, I owe you an enormous apology," he said. "We failed you completely. We should have seen what was happening and protected you instead of asking you to just get along with someone who is systematically hurting you." Janet's response was equally emotional as she grappled with the professional irony of being a healthcare provider who had missed clear signs of abuse in her own home. "I keep thinking about all the times you tried to tell us," she said. "All the times we dismissed your concerns or told you to work it out yourselves. We taught you that your safety didn't matter as much as family harmony." But perhaps the most significant moment came when Dr. Thompson asked Lily about her understanding of the long-term impact her behavior had on Maya's physical and emotional well-being. "I gave her kidney damage that could affect her for the rest of her life," Lily said, her voice breaking for the first time during the session. "I made her afraid in her own home. I made her question her own memories and feelings. I stole her sense of safety and trust, and I don't know if she'll ever be able to get that back completely." Maya looked at her sister's image on the screen and saw something she hadn't seen before: genuine remorse that went beyond self-pity or concern about consequences. Lily was finally understanding that her actions had caused real harm to a real person, not just violating abstract rules or disappointing authority figures. "The hardest part for me to accept is that Maya still tried to protect me even when I was hurting her," Lily continued. "She didn't want to get me in trouble. She kept making excuses for me to our parents and to the doctors. She was more loyal to me than I ever was to her." This observation hit Maya with unexpected force because it was true. Even while being systematically abused, she had tried to minimize Lily's actions to protect her from consequences. Even while being hospitalized for kidney damage, her first instinct had been to lie about how the injuries occurred. Her loyalty to family had been so strong that she'd prioritized Lily's welfare over her own safety, a pattern that Dr. Kim had been helping her recognize and change in her individual therapy. The session continued for 2 more hours, with each family member having the opportunity to ask questions, express feelings, and discuss what would be needed for them to feel safe and respected if they were to live together again. Maya's questions for Lily were direct and challenging, testing whether her sister's apparent change was superficial or genuine. "How do I know you won't hurt me again when you get frustrated?" Maya asked. Lily's answer demonstrated a level of self-awareness that hadn't been present in her earlier therapeutic work. She described specific triggers that led to her violent episodes, coping strategies she'd learned for managing anger and jealousy, and concrete behavioral changes she'd implemented during her stay with their aunt. She acknowledged that Maya had no obligation to trust her and that rebuilding their relationship would require consistent actions over time, not just promises and apologies. "If you ever feel unsafe around me, even for a second, you should call Catherine or Dr. Reeves immediately. My feelings about that don't matter. Your safety is more important than my comfort or my relationship with the family."
Maya's parents also had to answer difficult questions about their willingness to prioritize Maya's safety over family unity, their understanding of abuse dynamics, and their commitment to maintaining the therapeutic progress they'd made during Lily's absence. Dr. Reeves questioned them extensively about their response plans if future incidents occurred, their ability to recognize early warning signs of escalating conflict, and their acceptance of the possibility that permanent separation might be necessary if Lily couldn't maintain appropriate boundaries. "We understand now that our job is to protect Maya, not to preserve family harmony at her expense," Janet said. "If Lily can't live here safely, then she can't live here at all. Maya's well-being comes first." The session ended with a tentative plan for graduated reunification, beginning with supervised day visits and eventually progressing to Lily's return home if all participants demonstrated sustained progress. But Maya had the authority to halt the process at any point if she felt unsafe, or if Lily showed signs of reverting to previous patterns. Catherine Mills outlined the enhanced safety plan that would govern any reunification attempt. Monthly family therapy sessions would continue indefinitely. Lily would maintain individual therapy twice a week for at least a year. Maya would have a direct line to social services that bypassed parental involvement.
Random home visits would continue to ensure compliance with safety agreements. But perhaps most importantly, Maya's voice would be the determining factor in any decisions about family living arrangements. After months of having her concerns dismissed or minimized, she now had official authority to determine what felt safe and acceptable in her own home. The weeks following this breakthrough session were a period of cautious optimism mixed with realistic acknowledgement of the work that still needed to be done. Lily's first supervised visits home were awkward but peaceful, with all family members hyper-aware of their interactions and committed to practicing the communication skills they'd learned in therapy. Maya found herself studying Lily's behavior with the intensity of a researcher, looking for signs of genuine change versus surface compliance. She noticed that Lily's body language was different, less aggressive, more aware of personal space and physical boundaries. Her sister's tone of voice had lost the underlying threat that had characterized their interactions for years. Most importantly, Lily demonstrated the ability to manage frustration and disappointment without directing anger toward Maya. The first real test came during Maya's 18th birthday celebration, when the family gathered to acknowledge her acceptance of the full ride scholarship to her first-choice university. In the past, Maya's achievements had been triggers for Lily's worst behavior. But this milestone required Lily to demonstrate her ability to celebrate her sister's success without resentment or retaliation. "I'm proud of you," Lily said during the family dinner, her words carrying a sincerity that surprised everyone at the table. "You earned this scholarship despite everything I put you through. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Maya felt tears in her eyes as she heard genuine pride in her sister's voice for the first time in years. It wasn't the complete restoration of their relationship. Too much damage had been done for that to happen quickly. But it was a beginning, a foundation on which something healthier might eventually be built. "Thank you," Maya replied, meaning it. "It means a lot to hear you say that." The summer before Maya left for college became a period of careful rebuilding and gradual trust development. Lily's return home was permanent but conditional, with ongoing therapy requirements and safety protocols that would remain in place for at least 2 years. The family dynamics had fundamentally shifted, with Maya's safety and well-being explicitly prioritized in a way that felt both protective and healing. Maya's relationship with her parents evolved as they learned to see her as someone who had survived significant trauma rather than just their academically successful daughter. They began to understand the courage it had taken for her to maintain her grades, her community involvement, and her hope for the future while navigating systematic abuse at home. Their pride
In her accomplishments deepened when they recognized the additional obstacles she had overcome to achieve them. "I don't know how you did it," David told Maya during one of their new weekly one-on-one conversations. "Keeping your grades up, getting into college, staying involved in activities, all while dealing with what Lily was putting you through. You're stronger than any of us realized." Maya's individual therapy with Dr. Kim continued throughout the summer, focusing on processing the trauma she'd experienced while building confidence in her ability to recognize and respond to unhealthy relationship dynamics in the future. They worked on strategies for maintaining boundaries, trusting her instincts, and asking for help when she needed it, skills that had been systematically undermined by years of having her perceptions dismissed. "You've learned to advocate for yourself in ways that many adults never master," Dr. Kim told her during one of their sessions. "What you've been through was terrible, but you've developed remarkable insight and resilience because of how you chose to respond to it." The animal shelter where Maya volunteered became a testing ground for applying the trust-building skills she'd learned in therapy. Working with traumatized animals taught her about the gradual nature of healing, the importance of consistency and patience, and the possibility of forming healthy relationships even after experiencing systematic harm. "You have a gift for this work," Dr. Peterson told her as they watched a formerly aggressive cat allow Maya to pet him for the first time. "Have you considered veterinary medicine or animal behavioral therapy as career options?" Maya hadn't considered these possibilities before, but the suggestion resonated with something deep in her understanding of healing and recovery.
She began researching programs that combined veterinary medicine with animal behavioral therapy, discovering a path forward that would allow her to use her experiences to help other creatures who had survived trauma. As August approached and her departure for college grew imminent, Maya felt a complex mixture of excitement and apprehension. She was eager to begin the next chapter of her life, to discover who she could become when not defined by her role in a dysfunctional family system. But she was also nervous about leaving behind the support systems and therapeutic relationships that had been crucial to her recovery. "It's normal to feel scared about leaving," Dr. Kim assured her during one of their final sessions. "You're not just going to college. You're transitioning from a period of intensive healing into a new phase of your life where you'll apply what you've learned. That's both exciting and intimidating." Maya's last conversation with Lily before leaving for college took place on the back porch of their house, surrounded by the garden their mother had been cultivating as part of her own healing process. The conversation was tentative but honest, acknowledging both the damage that had been done and the possibility of something different developing between them in the future. "I know I can't undo what I did to you," Lily said, her voice quiet but steady. "And I know you might never be able to trust me completely again, but I want you to know that I'm going to keep working on myself, whether or not that ever benefits our relationship. You deserve better than what I gave you, and I'm finally understanding that." Maya nodded, feeling a sense of closure that she hadn't expected to find. "I appreciate that," she said. "I hope therapy keeps helping you, and I hope someday we can figure out what a healthy relationship between us might look like." They didn't hug or make promises about staying in close contact, but the conversation felt like a genuine ending to one chapter of their relationship and the possibility of a different kind of beginning in the future. Maya's departure for college was emotional but optimistic. Her parents drove her to campus, helping her move into her dormitory and meeting her roommate and some of her future classmates. Watching Maya interact with her new peers, they could see glimpses of the confident, outgoing person she had been before the abuse began escalating, and they felt hopeful about her ability to thrive in this new environment. "Call us whenever you need anything," Janet said as they prepared to leave campus, "and remember that you have people here who care about you and want you to succeed."
Maya's first semester was challenging but rewarding in ways she hadn't anticipated. Away from the dynamics of her family home, she began to rediscover aspects of her personality that had been suppressed by years of hypervigilance and defensive positioning. She was funny and outgoing, passionate about learning, and naturally drawn to helping other students who seemed overwhelmed or isolated. Her pre-veterinary studies provided intellectual challenges that felt meaningful and purposeful, connecting her academic work to her long-term goals of working with traumatized animals. She joined the campus animal welfare club and began volunteering at a local rescue organization, building on the skills she'd developed at home while expanding her understanding of animal behavior and rehabilitation. But perhaps most importantly, Maya discovered that her experiences had given her unique abilities to recognize and respond to other people who had survived trauma. Her dormitory became a safe space where students dealing with difficult family situations, mental health challenges, or histories of abuse could find understanding and support without judgment. "You just seem to get it," her roommate, Sarah, different from her high school friend, told her after Maya had helped her process a difficult conversation with her emotionally manipulative mother. "You know how to listen without trying to fix everything, and you don't act like people are crazy for having complicated feelings about their families." Maya began to understand that her survival of systematic abuse had equipped her with tools for understanding and helping others in ways that felt both healing for herself and valuable to her community. She was considering adding psychology courses to her pre-veterinary curriculum, thinking about the intersection between human and animal trauma recovery. Her relationship with her family evolved through regular phone calls, video chats, and occasional visits home. The conversations were different now, more honest, more focused on individual growth and healing, rather than maintaining surface harmony. Maya's parents updated her on their own therapy progress and their growing understanding of family dynamics and abuse prevention. Lily's progress was slower and more complicated,
But the monthly family therapy sessions continued to provide structure for processing past harm and building healthier communication patterns. Maya maintained clear boundaries about what kinds of contact felt safe and comfortable, and her family respected these limits without pressuring her to move faster than felt appropriate. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Kim had told Maya during their final session before she left for college. There will be setbacks and difficult days, but you've built a foundation of self-awareness and self-advocacy that will serve you well whatever challenges you encounter. As Maya completed her first year of college and prepared for a summer internship at a veterinary clinic that specialized in rehabilitation of abused and neglected animals, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The emergency room visit that had seemed like a crisis 18 months earlier had actually been the beginning of a healing process that had transformed not just her own life, but her entire family's understanding of safety, accountability, and genuine care for one another. The kidney damage that had revealed the extent of her sister's abuse was healing well, with regular medical checkups showing continued improvement in function. The emotional and psychological damage was healing too, though that process would likely continue for years, as Maya continued to discover new aspects of herself and develop healthy relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care. Looking back, Maya could see that her decision to drive herself to the emergency room that night had been an extraordinary act of courage, even though it hadn't felt brave at the time. It had felt like the only option left when all other strategies for survival had been exhausted. But choosing to prioritize her own safety, to seek help despite the potential consequences for her family relationships, had set in motion a series of events that had ultimately saved not just her own life, but created possibilities for healing that she had never imagined possible. As she prepared to begin her sophomore year with a clear sense of purpose and a growing understanding of how her experiences could serve others who had survived similar trauma, Maya felt grateful for the support systems that had helped her survive and thrive. The medical professionals who had recognized the signs of abuse, the social worker who had prioritized her
Safety. The therapists who had guided her family through the difficult process of acknowledging and changing harmful patterns. All of these people had played crucial roles in her recovery. But perhaps most importantly, Maya had learned to trust her own perceptions of that emergency room had illuminated more than just her physical injuries that night. They had revealed a path toward healing that she could never have imagined when she first pressed her hand against her aching back and acknowledged that she needed help. Now, 2 years later, Maya understood that asking for help hadn't been a sign of weakness, but rather an act of profound strength that had made everything else possible.